Hey guys! Tonight we saddle up and vanish into the wind because we're spending a long, wild day inside a Mongol Postal relay station, smack in the heart of the steppe. You're not just watching history tonight, you are it. The moon's high, the horses are breathing fog, and your joints are locked from the ride. You've been galloping through darkness, dodging holes and frozen puddles, and now finally you're stumbling into this godforsaken outpost with thighs so sore it feels like your bones might squeak. Oh, and heads up, you probably won't survive this job more than a few weeks. Between wolves, rebels, frostbite, and angry bureaucrats who hate late mail, this career path is just a warm hug from death with hoofbeats. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive under a frozen sky. The stars above you glint like shards of broken glass, and your breath fogs out into the blackness as your horse shudders to a stop. This is the station. Low, wind-beaten, surrounded by picket poles and half-buried carts, its entrance flanked by two flickering oil lamps that sputter weakly against the wind. Your hands are numb. Not just cold numb, more like wooden stick attached to your wrists numb. You slide off the saddle, or rather collapse off it, and your legs forget how to be legs. You nearly faceplant into a snowdrift that smells faintly of horse pee and dried mutton. Glamorous life, isn't it? Someone's already opening the flap of the jer, a round tent that squats like a mushroom near the center of the station yard. Warmth spills out, along with the unmistakable scent of boiled fat and unwashed feet. A man peers out, frowning. "Late," he grunts. No hello, no name. You stagger inside, dragging your saddlebags behind you like dead weight. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and the heat from a central stove belching steam. Mongol couriers, fellow yam riders like you, lie in varying states of semi-consciousness on folded wool blankets. You're stepping over boots, bundles of dried fish, and at least one guy who might be asleep or might be passed out. 1 foot in, and someone's already kicked your shin by accident. There's no ceremony. You drop your gear by the stove and fall beside it, curling around its heat like a cat in a laundry basket. The aches don't fade. They just become part of the background noise, like the snoring from the guy beside you, and the occasional loud shift of someone's armor plates creaking. Through half-lidded eyes, you scan the inside of the jer. The walls are lined with leather and felt, stitched with old patterns you can't identify. Saddles hang from hooks. A bow leans beside the stove, its string humming slightly in the draft. You spot a wooden tablet, part of the Paisa system, a passport that marks this place as an official part of the Imperial Relay. That one slab of carved wood means you're in Genghis Khan's world now, friend. Like it or not. Here's your first mainstream fact. The Mongol Postal system, called the YAM, was one of the most advanced communication networks in history. Over 200,000 horses. Relay stations every 25 to 30 miles. It let Genghis Khan's orders reach the edge of his empire in a matter of days. Think of it like FedEx on fermented milk and sheer terror. You let your head thud back onto your folded cloak. It's damp. Probably sweat. Hopefully yours. Doesn't matter. You're asleep in seconds, lulled by the scent of smoldering dung bricks and the symphony of grown men snoring through their beards. But of course, sleep is a lie. Sometime in the dead of night, you're wrenched awake by someone accidentally stepping on your chest. You sit up coughing, a heavy boot and the taste of wool in your mouth. The man mumbles an apology in a dialect you don't recognize and throws more wood on the stove. Sparks flutter upward. Your stomach growls. Next to you, a courier mutters in his sleep, whispering something about wolves and dried apricots. Someone else shifts and belches wetly. Cozy, huh? Let's toss in your quirky tidbit. One traveler once reported that Mongol couriers could ride for 3 to 5 days without stopping to sleep, surviving entirely on horse blood, fermented milk, and willpower. Some would even nick a vein from the horse's neck mid-ride, drink straight from it, patch the horse up, and keep going. If that's not the most metal snack break in history, I don't know what is. A cold draft tickles your toes. You realize your boots are still on, because taking them off would mean smelling your own feet. And honestly, you'd rather freeze. Someone stirs near the flap and begins softly humming a lullaby. It's haunting, minor key, and just familiar enough to make your eyes sting for reasons you can't quite name. Historians still argue whether the yam system truly ran like clockwork or if that's just the empire's own propaganda talking. Some claim riders were often late, that posts went unmanned for weeks, and that theft, bribes, and accidental horse swaps plagued the whole network. But to the average Mongol, it was still a marvel. You finally drift off again, face buried in your cloak, knees tucked close, and one hand still curled as if gripping imaginary reins. And somewhere outside, the wind starts to shift. Awaiting continue. You wake up to a rhythmic thumping against your head, gentle at first, then not so gentle. It takes you a few groggy seconds to realize someone is trying to shift your skull off their saddlebag, which they were clearly using as a pillow. You'd stolen it in your sleep, apparently. That's fair. You mumble an apology and roll the other way, smacking your nose into a folded quiver. The air in the yurt is sour and thick, like soup made of feet and campfire smoke. You blink crusted sleep from your eyes and try to sit up, your spine crunching like old parchment. Around you, the other couriers are still sprawled in various uncomfortable poses, wrapped in wool cloaks and fur scraps. You spot one guy using his own arm as a pillow. Bold move. Someone kicks the flap open and yells something guttural and indecipherable. Cold air rushes in, slicing through the warmth like a dagger. The entire jar stirs like a disturbed anthill. This place is no cozy little village inn. It's a chaos capsule. Everyone's here for the same reason, to rest just long enough to keep galloping. The Mongol Postal Relay was the empire's beating heart. Missives, imperial decrees, secret reports, and occasionally cheese all passed through stations like this one, all riding on exhausted backs like yours. You reach for your boot, find it already half frozen, and grunt as you shove your foot in. The sensation is halfway between stepping into a snowbank and putting your toes in someone's cold soup. You try not to think about it. As you shuffle upright, a small disaster unfolds behind you. One of the younger couriers, a kid barely out of adolescence, with hair that clearly hasn't met water in weeks, stretches too far and flips backward over a pile of saddles. He lands with a crash that wakes up the rest of the tent. Someone yells. Someone else laughs. A third person throws a dried yak turd at the offender. Welcome to the Jur of Grunts. Here, couriers are all stripped of rank, of pride, and of personal hygiene. You've all got the same job. Carry messages across the empire with terrifying speed and barely any sleep. In here, it's like a grimy brotherhood of limbs, odors, and mutual complaints. No matter where you're from, Chagatai, Golden Horde, or just somewhere west of the Volga, in this yurt, you're the same flavor of tired. The stove, bless it, is the only luxury. Someone's piled on fresh dung bricks and the air thickens with their greasy warmth. You edge closer, stretching fingers over the top, risking a mild burn for the pleasure of feeling anything again. A loud snore rattles the ceiling poles. You turn to see the source, an older courier who's rolled flat on his back and is now vibrating the floor with his sinuses. His mouth hangs open wide enough to catch flies, and judging by the sound, he's snoring in at least 2 languages. You try to lie down again, wedging yourself between 2 slumped bundles of human. One of them shifts and mutters something about a cursed saddle strap. You nod vaguely, unsure if it was a dream or just a deeply relatable complaint. Here's your historical anchor. These relay stations were set every 25 to 30 miles, perfectly spaced for a hard ride on a fresh horse. Couriers could change mounts and press on immediately. Some days, you could cover hundreds of miles without stopping for more than a quick swig of fermented mare's milk. Other days, you ended up here, in the human swamp of sweat and snoring. You're just starting to drift again when, thwack! Something thumps you directly in the forehead. Hard. You jolt upright, heart slamming, and look around. A boot? A club? An enemy? Nope. It's the low-hanging saddle horn of the bag rack, swinging gently in the morning breeze. You'd inched under it while sleeping. Now it's delivered justice to your forehead. You rub the rising lump and mutter something very unflattering about saddlebags. Still, it's probably better than the time last week when that one courier accidentally cuddled a goat all night. Thought it was a bedroll. It was not. Your quirky fact for today: Some Mongol stations were rumored to double as makeshift jails for problematic couriers, those who tampered with messages, took too long, or just got a little too comfortable. Let's just say, if you were caught trying to read a sealed scroll, you might end up cleaning horse stalls indefinitely. Or worse, becoming a horse stall. The yurt comes alive in stages. Men stretch, spit, scratch, and curse in 3 different languages. The scent of something boiling outside, probably tea, possibly goat water, drifts in and gives the morning a bitter tang. You hear a courier mumble, still argue whether it was 20,000 or 30,000 horses. He's talking about the total number used in the yam, half asleep, and quoting a debate from some board official he met weeks ago. Historians still argue whether the entire system was that large, his bunkmate replies, eyes still closed. Empire records lie. You're inclined to believe both. As you lace your boots and feel the throb of the bump on your head, you realize your body already aches in anticipation of the next ride. You haven't even left yet. Someone sneezes, loudly. You swear part of the ceiling felt that. And just like that, it's time to face the day. Awaiting continue. You're half dreaming when it starts. A high-pitched bleat slices through the air like an arrow through canvas, and then another and another. You bolt upright, convinced some kind of apocalyptic battle is breaking out, only to realize it's just a goat. A deeply distressed, possibly possessed goat. Then someone kicks over a tin bowl. Hot liquid sloshes onto the floor, followed by a yelp and a string of colorful words that manage to be offensive in at least 2 regions of the empire. You instinctively curl tighter under your blanket, but the station is already lurching into full gear. Pre-dawn chaos has arrived. The sky outside is still a cold slate gray, but the jeer is waking like a beast. Blankets are being kicked off. Saddles are clunking. Boots scrape across the packed dirt floor, and someone's shouting about a missing cup, again. You don't know whose job it is to feed the goat, but judging by the volume of its rage, that person has failed profoundly. A hand appears in front of your face, holding a steaming wooden bowl. You blink at it. A thick, sour-smelling brew ripples inside. It's Ira, goat milk tea, and what might be a hint of fermented something. Maybe pine resin or regret. Drink, says the courier holding it, not unkindly. His face is lined, wind-burned, and missing part of one ear. You take the bowl with both hands, fingers burning against the heat, and sip. It tastes like someone boiled a sock in yogurt. You nod in gratitude anyway. There's no such thing as picky out here. Food is food. Warm is warm. You step outside and are hit with a wall of smells, animal sweat, damp leather, something vaguely burnt, and a slice of silence. The land around the station is flat and wide, rimmed with low mountains that huddle like sleeping giants. The sky is smeared with a hint of pink, where the sun threatens to rise, but hasn't yet found the nerve. Frost clings to the ground. A crow lands on the roof of the goat shelter and caws like it owns the place. It probably does. You're not alone. The yard is alive with motion. One man is hacking at a frozen water trough with what appears to be a meat cleaver. Another is attempting to chase a chicken, poorly. The chicken, for its part, is extremely aware of its own worth and wants no part of this breakfast arrangement. You shuffle toward the tack rack, your bowl still in hand. It's not the best idea to walk and sip at the same time, and you nearly trip over a length of frayed rope someone left lying in the frost. Your arm jerks to recover, and half the tea sloshes directly onto your sleeve. A puff of steam rises. You sigh. Now you smell like breakfast and body odor. A courier passes by and raises an eyebrow. Nice cologne, he mutters. Here's your historical fact of the moment. Morning routines in Mongol relay stations were all about efficiency. The Mongol Empire valued speed and order, even if the stations themselves looked like miniature war zones. Tea was boiled before dawn, saddles were checked, logs updated, and horses watered. It might have looked chaotic, but it worked. You hand off your bowl to a wide-shouldered man who collects dishes with the energy of someone who's been awake since before there was a dawn. He grunts and moves on. Inside the stable area, a young boy, station-born, judging by his bare feet and casual disregard for hypothermia, carries a bundle of cloth. It wiggles. You stare. It bleats. Ah, the screaming goat has entered Act 2. The boy sets it down near the supply tent, mutters something about demon spirit, and runs off before anyone can ask for clarification. You just stand there, holding a saddle strap, unsure if you've imagined the last 30 seconds or not. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some Mongol stations were believed to have spirit animals, not pets, but creatures thought to protect the station from bandits, illness, or apparently boredom. Chickens were common. One record mentions a raven that delivered omens in the form of vomited bones. Comforting. You're about to check on your horse when a familiar sound cuts through the air. A throat clearing. Firm, rehearsed, slightly judgmental. You turn. There, framed in the open gate, is the station chief. Wrapped in layered felt robes, his hair neatly braided, and his belt decorated with what looks like a ceremonial knife and a rolled scroll, he surveys the yard with the expression of a man who has seen better mornings and worse employees. Form up, he says, voice flat. One by one, couriers shuffle into a line, tugging on boots, strapping on gear, hiding leftover snacks. The station chief inspects you all like a particularly disappointed teacher on test day. Inventory after breakfast, he announces. If anything is missing again, his eyes land on the younger courier still chewing quietly on a hunk of dried meat, I will personally make you ride to Karakoram on foot. You don't know if he's kidding. No one laughs. Also, he adds, stop feeding the goat firewood. It doesn't help his mood. The line disperses with various levels of grumbling. You head toward the saddlery tent, where gear is checked, counted, and repaired, mostly with horsehair thread and hope. As you start inspecting your saddlebag buckles for wear, a courier next to you sighs and mutters, historians still argue whether these stations were paid well or paid at all. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Depends on the decade. Some say we were honored servants of the Khan. Others say we were just disposable legs. You nod. You're starting to feel like both. Behind you, the goat bleats again. You don't turn around. Awaiting continue. By now, your fingertips are numb from tightening saddle straps, and your nose is doing that weird thing where it runs from the cold but also might be freezing in place. You wipe it with the back of your glove, because dignity isn't part of the uniform anymore. The station chief claps his hands twice. That's the signal. Couriers begin lining up with their assignments, all pre-sorted and rolled into tight, oilskin-wrapped bundles. You step into the queue, feeling your stomach gurgle ominously, either from nerves, last night's mystery stew, or both. Your turn. The chief barely glances at you as he shoves the scroll into your hands. North route, 4 stops, fresh mount at each, ride fast. You nod. The bundle feels light but important. They always do. Even if it's just another trade notice about sheep regulations or taxes on fermented fish paste, it's sealed with the Khan's authority, and that means you guard it with your life. Or, at the very least, your last working ankle. You stow the message carefully inside the inner pocket of your robe, close to your body. It's already warm with your breath and sweat, and weirdly comforting, like holding a secret that could change someone's life or just ruin someone's dinner plans. Your horse is waiting out back. You named him Storm Puddle. He's half Mongol steed, half extremely sarcastic furniture. Not beautiful, not charming, but stubbornly reliable. He flicks his ears as you approach, like he's just realized the universe has cursed him with you again. You give him a pat, and he exhales hard through his nose, possibly a sigh, possibly a threat. It's hard to tell with horses. The stable boy grins as he hands you the reins. He's fresh. Slept better than you, probably. You glance at the horse's muddy hooves and eye bags. Doubt it. Still, the saddle is already packed, the bags are tight, and the stirrups have been adjusted to your lopsided dimensions. You mount up with a grunt that probably costs you a year of spinal health. Out here, every courier has a routine before departure. You check the saddle straps again. You glance back to make sure the goat isn't following you. It's happened before. You mutter a small, entirely personal prayer, part curse, part plea, part existential pep talk. And then you ride. The gate creaks open, and the world expands instantly. There's no fanfare, just wind and hoofbeats and the endless, undulating stretch of the steppe ahead of you. Grass rustles like dry silk under the breeze. The air is cold enough to sting your lungs, but the motion keeps your blood moving. Your horse finds his rhythm quickly, and within moments you're soaring across a landscape so wide and flat it feels like you're galloping across the back of the sky. Here's your historical fact. Mongol horses were small, stocky, and built for endurance rather than speed. A courier could ride dozens of miles before switching mounts, and many had a mental map of terrain, water holes, and shelter points carved into their brains. Navigation wasn't just instinct, it was survival. You lean forward slightly, easing the weight off the saddle's hard edge, and scan the horizon. Nothing but golden grasslands interrupted by the occasional rock pile or animal skull. You pass a withered tree stump that looks like it's been dead since Genghis was in diapers. There's something strange about the quiet. No carts, no city noise, just wind, hooves, breath. It's hypnotic. Until you remember that bandits exist. Yes, even this far from anything, someone might be out here looking to intercept a message like yours. Maybe not this one. Tax notices aren't sexy. But others? Political orders, supply routes, military updates? Worth a fortune in the right or wrong hands. Your quirky tidbit for this stretch: some couriers wore bells on their boots. Not for flair, but to signal to nearby guards or villagers that they weren't raiders. Because, fun fact, galloping alone across the plains wearing a fur cloak makes you look exactly like someone who might stab a goat and take your cheese. Your hand instinctively checks the side pouch holding your dagger. It's there, comforting, worn, and probably not enough against anyone serious. But it's better than a scroll and a mean stare. A hawk circles overhead, catching a thermal like it owns the air. You watch it for a moment until your horse stumbles slightly. You refocus. Storm Puddle shakes out his mane and keeps going. You mutter, "Don't get dramatic," under your breath. The sun's finally made up its mind to rise. Light rolls over the landscape like a slow pour of honey. Everything warms by a degree or two, and your fingers start to feel like fingers again, instead of frost-covered sausages. Somewhere in the distance, smoke curls up from a small cluster of tents. A herder camp, most likely, not part of the Yam system but known to you. They sometimes offer food or shelter to riders, but also sometimes send you off with bad cheese and gossip about cursed lakes. You don't stop, not this time. Your orders are to ride through. Still, the smell of cooking makes your stomach do backflips. You reach into your coat pocket and fish out a chunk of dried meat. It's mostly edible. Chewing it feels like trying to fold leather with your molars, but it passes the time. Historians still argue whether couriers carried backup supplies or if they lived off the land. Some say every relay station gave rations. Others insist only top priority messengers got that luxury. Judging by the current chewiness in your jaw, you're leaning toward the eat whatever you can find. School of thought. Time passes strangely on the step. Hours blend into hooves. You hum to yourself, then whistle, then talk to your horse, then stop when you realize you're losing the argument. There's no clock out here, no landmarks, just wind, grass, and the occasional patch of frozen dung. Finally, just as your thighs are beginning to scream in protest, you see it, a speck on the horizon. It grows steadily as you approach. Another station, another checkpoint. A fresh horse, hopefully. Maybe a cup of hot arag if the spirits are kind, and someone remembered to boil the goat milk today. You nudge Storm Puddle onward, one leg of the journey done, 13 to go. Awaiting continue. You reach the relay station just as the sun finishes peeling the last shadows off the ground. It's a modest outpost, stitched into the landscape like a patch on a horse blanket. Nothing fancy, just a small jur, a wind-worn stable, a fence made mostly of stubbornness, and a smoke trail curling out of a chimney like it's trying not to be noticed. You swing off your horse with all the grace of a sack of yams falling off a shelf. Your knees crack. Your spine creaks. You bow slightly, not in reverence, but because your lower back has briefly stopped cooperating. Storm Puddle stands still, blessedly calm, eyes half closed as if to say, "Go on, I'll wait here and judge you." You hand him off to the stable hand, an older boy with long sleeves, a face full of freckles, and the general attitude of someone who's seen one too many angry couriers in a day. He clicks his tongue, runs a practiced hand down Storm Puddle's flank, and nods. Tired, needs barley and a nap. "Same," you reply. The boy snorts, then disappears with your horse into the shadows of the stable. You head for the jur. A curtain of coarse felt swings aside before you even reach it, and a woman steps out, wiping her hands on an apron stained with milk, mud, and a suspicious amount of something orange. "You're late," she says. "By 5 minutes." That's late. You blink. She's right. Technically. Inside, the station smells like boiled mutton, wet wool, and a whiff of something sweet, Fermented mare's milk, probably. You inhale deeply. Despite everything, it's kind of comforting. Like an old sweater that someone spilled soup on 3 winters ago, but you refuse to throw away. She points to a low stool near the fire. Sit, eat. You do. You've learned better than to argue. A bowl is shoved into your hands. Inside, milky tea, strips of boiled meat, and something gray and gelatinous floating near the edge. You prod it with your spoon. It jiggles ominously. You eat it anyway. Here's your historical fact. Each relay station along the Mongol Yam route was expected to offer food, shelter, and a fresh mount to all official couriers. These stops were spaced roughly every 25 to 30 miles, and they functioned with military precision, at least on paper. In reality, depends on the station. You glance around. This one's decent. Everything is patched, but clean. The hearth is hot. The woman, clearly the boss here, moves with the confidence of someone who has field-dressed both sheep and insubordinate messengers. A kid scurries past holding a bag of oats almost as big as himself. He offers you a grin with 2 missing teeth. You nod politely, mouth full of something chewy. The woman sits across from you, folds her arms, and eyes you like a hawk sizing up a rabbit with bad posture. Scroll? You reach into your robe, pull it free, and hand it to her. She doesn't open it, just checks the seal, nods, and tucks it away into a compartment in the station chest. It'll go out with Gentuya after breakfast. Gentuya? You ask through a mouthful. My daughter. You raise your brows. She rides? She outrides half the men on this route. Broke a horse's jaw last week when it tried to throw her. You decide not to ask follow-up questions. The food is surprisingly good. The tea warms your stomach, and the meat, whatever it is seasoned with something that tastes vaguely like garlic and smoke. You finish the bowl. Seconds appear before you ask. You take it as a compliment. Your quirky tidbit for this leg. Some relay station families became so famous for their hospitality or their speed in forwarding messages, they were treated like minor nobility. There's even a half-believable tale about one station chief who was offered a royal marriage match until someone realized she'd already married a goat. For tax reasons. Across the gyr, a low trunk is being opened by a man with a salt and pepper braid and a limp. Inside, spare gear, dispatch logs, and a ledger so worn it looks like it's survived 3 dynasties in a flood. He grumbles something about ink freezing again. You glance toward the door. Time to switch mounts and move. You excuse yourself, bow slightly to the woman, and step outside just as a fresh horse is being led out by the freckled stable boy. This one's younger, leaner, with twitchy muscles, and the kind of wild eyes that say, I might run fast, or I might end your career. You approach cautiously. He snorts and stomps. The boy just grins. This one's got fire, name's Nergue. Nameless? The boy shrugs. Didn't want to jinx him. You check the girth strap, adjust the stirrups, and mount up, much more gracefully this time. Either your body's waking up or your nerves have simply gone numb. From behind, the station chief's voice drifts out. Stay east of the hills. Snow's thicker to the west. You nod. The advice is simple, practical, and probably life-saving. Historians still argue whether weather tracking across the Yam routes was done systematically or left to the instinct of local riders. Some suggest early Mongol relay systems had basic meteorological logs. Others believe it was all word of mouth and gut feeling. In your case, a well-timed gut feeling can be the difference between a shortcut and a frostbitten toe. You click your tongue. Nergue bolts forward like a spring uncoiling. Within seconds, the station is a shrinking dot behind you. This stretch is rougher. The grass grows higher, clumped around icy ridges that trip up careless hooves. But your mount is light and fast, his hooves barely touching the ground. You pass herds of gazelle in the distance, skittish, alert, and prettier than you on your best day. The wind whips harder here. You pull your robe tighter, duck your head, and lean into the ride. Minutes pass, then hours. Riding like this requires strange focus. You don't think in full sentences anymore, just instincts. Check horizon, scan ground, breathe steady, don't bite your tongue on the next bump. A flock of cranes flies overhead in a perfect V. You glance up, watch them glide through the pale sky. Their wings don't flap, they just ride the current like paper charms on a string. It's beautiful. It's fleeting. And then you almost run straight into a marmot hole. Nergue jerks sideways with a shriek and you nearly lose your balance. Your teeth clack, your eyes water. You slow him down, panting, heart hammering. Breathe. Back on track. Somewhere ahead, another station waits. Awaiting continue. Your thighs ache in that deep, worrisome way that suggests you'll be walking like a drunken crab for the next 3 days. But there's no slowing down now. You adjust your grip on the reins, roll your shoulders, and press your knees gently into Nergi's sides. He responds with a snort and a faster trot, almost like he's showing off. The terrain shifts subtly as you move eastward. The steppe remains endless, but now it's stitched with frozen creek beds, wind-sculpted rock ridges, and the occasional fence made from dried bones and ambition. You steer clear of those. Bad vibes. Somewhere behind you, the station has already passed your message to the next relay rider. Somewhere ahead, another set of eyes is scanning the horizon, waiting to see if you bring anything worth sending further. This is the rhythm of the YAM system. Horses ride, messages fly, and you, just a human string between galloping knots, keep it all moving. You've got another hour or two before your next stop. You know this leg. It's infamous for being both beautiful and bizarre. The land opens wide into a basin filled with ancient rock mounds and eerie silence. Locals call it whispering ground. Not because of ghosts, though that's what some say, but because the wind whistles strangely here, funneling through stone like a flute. You hear it now, that high, trembling sound just under the breeze, like a flute made of bones. Or a voice calling across centuries. Totally not creepy. Totally fine. You hum to yourself. An old tavern tune about boiled mutton and lost lovers. It helps pass the time. Nergui's ears twitch, but he doesn't protest. Here's your historical fact. The Mongol Yam system, or Urto, was one of the most efficient communication networks of its time. At its height, it stretched over 25,000 miles, with thousands of relay stations and tens of thousands of horses in active rotation. It allowed the great Khans to receive reports from the edges of their empire in just days. You pause at a ridge, standing in your stirrups for a better view. To the south, a herd of wild sheep grazes among the rocks. Their wool is thick with frost, and their horns curve like ancient scrolls. You wonder briefly if one of them could carry a message. You decide no. You've seen what sheep do to saddles. To the north, a cluster of black specks moves slowly, pack camels, most likely, hauling trade goods along the merchant route that occasionally overlaps the Yam. You consider heading that way for company. Then you remember the last time you shared a trail with camel caravans, 20 hours of slow, smelly progress, and one extremely unfortunate incident involving fermented yogurt and a sandal. You ride on alone. The wind kicks up again, sharper now, needling your cheeks. You tug your scarf higher. The sky has begun to cloud over, muting the sun into a pale smear. Snow? Maybe. Or maybe just a threat of it, like an annoyed sky muttering under its breath. A soft howl rises from the basin below. You glance sideways, and then you see it. The sacred stones. They rise in a perfect arc, weathered gray pillars set into the earth like the ribs of some ancient beast. There's no official map for them. Too many riders say they don't exist. But here they are, towering, silent, and yes, whispering. You slow your horse, dismount carefully, and lead him toward the closest stone. Each one is carved with symbols, circles, spirals, horse heads. Some you recognize, others just make your skin crawl a little. The wind picks up again, funneling between them and carrying your own footsteps back to you a half-second too late. Your quirky tidbit for this section: Mongol couriers often pass through regions filled with sacred or mysterious landmarks. Some were ancient Turkic monuments. Others were burial markers, weathered into legend. Riders were known to leave offerings, coins, ribbons, horsehair, just in case. Not for religion, necessarily. Just insurance. You reach into your saddlebag and pull out a strip of red cloth. You tie it to one of the stones. The wind catches it instantly, fluttering like a heartbeat. You don't know if it'll help, but you don't want to find out what happens if you don't. Historians still argue whether these stone sites were pre-Mongol spiritual centers, or if the Mongols themselves erected them during expansion. The lack of clear documentation has turned it into a favorite academic boxing ring. Meanwhile, you're just trying not to offend whatever may or may not be buried here. You remount, a little faster this time. The air grows colder. Snow begins to fall, just a few flecks at first, then more, swirling like ash from some invisible fire. You pull your hood up and kick Nergui into a faster gait. No thunder, no lightning, Just soft white silence and a growing sense that something is watching. Then, finally, salvation. Smoke on the horizon. Another station. This one is half buried in a hill. Only the top of the jur shows above the snow-drifted slope with a narrow wooden gate and two tiny windows glowing like sleepy eyes. You knock once with your boot. The flap opens. A young man blinks at you, bleary-eyed. "Courier?" he mutters. "No," you say. "Goat delivery." He doesn't even smile. Just waves you in. Inside, warmth. Glorious, nose-thawing, knee-melting warmth. There are two other riders already inside, both chewing dried roots and glaring at the wall like it personally offended them. You nod in greeting. They nod back, barely. The station keeper tosses you a mug of hot broth. You drink it greedily, ignoring whatever floaty bits might be swimming near the surface. You don't plan to stay long. Just enough time to switch mounts, maybe stretch, definitely not nap, even though your body is screaming for it. You check the next scroll. It's small, sealed in yellow wax. Urgent. Of course it is. You sigh, stretch your back with a crack like distant thunder, and head for the exit. A fresh horse waits outside. This one's spotted, nervous, and steaming like a bread roll. The stable girl grins at you. He bites. Of course he does. You mount up. The storm is light now, manageable. You tuck the scroll close to your chest and ride.
Awaiting continue.
The spotted horse bucks slightly as you settle in, just to remind you who's in charge here. You pat his neck and whisper something vaguely comforting in a mixture of Mongolian and nonsense. It seems to work, or at least he doesn't try to throw you into a snowbank. The storm lingers like a bad song stuck in your head. Thin flakes of snow swirl sideways, catching in your eyelashes, dusting your shoulders, making the world feel both smaller and stranger. Visibility drops, but the trail is still faintly visible beneath your horse's hooves. You ride by memory now, more than sight. Your fingers are cold, but your mind stays sharp. You're carrying an urgent scroll, sealed in yellow wax. That means military correspondence, or a directive from someone who thinks they're important enough to jump the line. Possibly both. The horse's hooves crunch through crusted snow as you veer slightly west, hugging the ridge. You need shelter before the worst of the weather settles in. Not a station, there isn't one for miles, but an old hideaway used by smugglers and couriers who know where to look. It's more cave than home, but it'll do. You mutter to the horse again. Almost there. He snorts in agreement, or judgment. The rocks begin to rise around you, jagged and streaked with wind-blasted lichen. You remember the landmark. Two bent trees forming a crooked arch. There, to the left. You guide your mount toward it, ducking low as you pass beneath. And there it is. The hollow. Just big enough for a rider and a half-frozen horse. The walls are lined with dry grass, old fire scars, and someone's forgotten mitten. You dismount, stretch your legs, and light a small fire with the flint you always keep tucked in your boot. The flames catch slowly, but they catch. You huddle close, stripping off your gloves to thaw your fingers. Here's your historical fact. Mongol couriers weren't just fast. They were trained. Riders knew how to survive in extreme weather, how to navigate using stars and landmarks, and how to care for multiple horses over long distances. The Empire invested heavily in their survival, not out of kindness, but because losing a message could mean losing a battle. You sip hot water from your skin. It tastes slightly of goat, but you're not picky. Outside, the wind howls again. You pull your robe tighter and tuck the yellow waxed scroll deeper into your shirt. It's not waterproof, and you're not about to risk your neck riding 80 miles just to deliver wet ink. You start cataloging the other oddities of this little shelter. Bones in the corner, long since picked clean. A horseshoe wedged into the wall like someone meant to use it for a hook. And a small leather pouch hanging from a twig nailed into the stone. Curiosity gets the better of you. Inside the pouch, dried berries, a sliver of flint, and a scrap of cloth with runes scratched into the weave. You don't touch the cloth. Your quirky tidbit for this section: many relay riders carried good luck charms or protection bundles. These included animal bones, knots of hair, and even tiny dolls sewn from felt and metal thread. Some were gifts from mothers. Others were traded at roadside shrines. You've got one too, a carved wood pendant shaped like a galloping horse. You rub it now without even realizing. The snow thickens. You consider staying overnight. But the scroll is urgent, and you're restless. Historians still argue whether these unofficial shelters, caves, stone lean-tos, tree hollows, were sanctioned by the imperial system or simply tolerated. Some believe the network encouraged riders to develop backup shelters. Others insist they were entirely improvised. Either way, they often meant the difference between finishing a run or freezing mid-route. You extinguish the fire with a scoop of snow, saddle up again, and whisper a small thanks to the shelter, just in case. The next leg is narrow and treacherous, winding between low cliffs. You press your knees in tighter, guiding your horse with slight shifts of your weight. He obeys, grudgingly. The snow softens the world into a kind of dreamscape. Trees loom like statues, rocks take on animal shapes. A stump becomes a crouching wolf, until it doesn't. You begin to drift, thoughts unspooling into long loops. What's in the scroll? You're not supposed to wonder, but you do. A war update, a death sentence, a marriage proposal between nobles who've never met. You've carried all those before. Once you transported a love poem written on the back of a tax decree. Another time, it was a single feather in a sealed pouch. No explanation, no instructions. You've learned to stop asking. And yet, sometimes you wish you knew. The horse slows, his ears twitch, you scan ahead. There, another rider. He's on foot, leading his horse by the reins. Limping, you pull closer, keeping a hand near your knife, just in case. Courier, you call out. He turns. His face is pale and pinched with cold. Blood stains his left boot. Twisted my ankle, he says through chattering teeth. Horse stumbled. You dismount and check the horse first. No obvious injury, but exhausted. Foam crusted at the lips. You eye the man. He's still clutching a scroll. Urgent? You ask. He nods. You sigh, pull your saddlebag off and rearrange it. Get on mine. I'll walk. He hesitates. Do you want to freeze here? You ask, not unkindly. He climbs into the saddle slowly, wincing with every shift. You take his reins in yours, walking with heavy steps through the snow, one rider short of a Christmas song. The miles crawl, the wind presses in. But the station rises ahead, just a shadow at first, then clearer. Squat, solid, and belching smoke from its chimney like a dragon with a cough. You bang on the door with your elbow. A gruff voice answers. Password? You blink. I have 2 horses and 1 angry man. The door opens. Inside, chaos. A pot boiling over, a chicken perched on a stool, a station clerk trying to stuff scrolls into cubby holes while a goat gnaws on his boot. You're home. Well, temporarily. You help the injured rider off the horse. Someone grabs him. Another takes your scrolls. The yellow wax disappears into a back room. Someone hands you a warm bun stuffed with onion and lamb. You eat it in one bite. The chaos settles. For now. You sit on the low bench beside the fire, boots off, socks steaming, stomach slowly rebooting from that lamb bun you inhaled like a starving wolf. Across from you, the injured rider snores under a wool blanket, his swollen ankle propped up on a pile of old saddlebags. A child, the station keeper's maybe, crawls across the floor with a wooden horse, making exaggerated galloping noises and crashing it occasionally into your leg. You don't mind. This station is louder than the others. Busier, too. It's a crossroads of sorts, where 3 major yam routes intersect. Messages come here from the north, the west, and the capital, all waiting to be sorted, rerouted, and remounted onto fresh horses. The scrolls are stacked in color-coded bundles behind the station clerk's table. Red wax, black wax, yellow, green, no seal at all, coded for urgency, origin, and importance. You glance at them with idle curiosity. Yours, the yellow wax scroll, is already gone. You have no idea where it went or who carries it now. That's how the system works. You pass the message on and you keep moving. Here's your historical fact. Mongol postal stations didn't just serve couriers. They became administrative hubs, intelligence checkpoints, and often even safe havens for foreign envoys or merchants with a valid paisa, a metal passport granting passage and hospitality. If you carried one, doors opened, food appeared, and questions got fewer. You don't carry a paisa. You're not that important. But you've seen them. A sliver of silver or bronze, sometimes engraved with a hawk or the script of the Great Khan dangling from the necks of the messengers like divine backstage passes. The station keeper gestures you over. He's holding out a scroll. For you, he says, new route. Of course it's a new route. Why would it be anything else? You accept it and break the seal. Green wax. Not as urgent, but still time-sensitive. Destination, the valley province of Tsetserleg. Mountain country. Cold, remote, and not exactly popular among couriers. You sigh, then smile, because somehow, deep down, you're glad to be moving again. As you relace your boots, you notice a map pinned to the wall, hand-drawn, fading at the edges. Not an official map, a rider's map. It shows shortcuts, hidden streams, known bandit ambush sites, and little scribbled notes like, avoid this bridge, and ask for onion dumplings here. There's even a tiny sketch of a cat wearing a hat. Nobody explains it. You don't ask. You make a quick study of your new route. Then you scan the room for something else. A mount. The stable is crowded tonight, too crowded. Most of the good horses are already claimed by other riders. What's left is a mix of half-retired nags, wide-eyed yearlings, and one mare that looks like she recently fought a bear, and maybe won. You point at the mare. Her. The stable hand gives you a look like you've just asked to ride his grandmother. She's temperamental, he warns. So am I, you reply, and that's that. You saddle up, double-check your bags, and mount the mare. She whinnies in irritation and spins in a tight circle before finally settling. You leave the station under a moonless sky. The trail out of the crossroads curls east and then sharply south, climbing slowly toward the lower ridges of the mountains. You can already feel the air changing, thinner, colder, edged with pine. The wind carries 1,000 scents: wood smoke, snow, animal musk, distant dung fires. Somewhere up ahead is a watch post. Not a relay station, not exactly. These are rough wooden outposts staffed by scouts or soldiers who monitor traffic, protect mail routes, and occasionally ask too many questions. They're part of the larger YAM security system, and they don't always like couriers who arrive unannounced in the middle of the night. You lean forward, speaking low to the mare. Let's try not to get speared tonight. She doesn't reply, but her ears flick back. You take it as agreement. The trees grow thicker. The path narrows. You dismount when the trail becomes too rocky, leading the horse on foot while ducking under pine branches and hopping frozen puddles. Your breath fogs in the cold, and the sound of your boots crunching over snow is weirdly comforting. Then suddenly, shouts. You freeze. Up ahead, torchlight. 3 figures step from the trees, clad in heavy cloaks and carrying long spears. One of them points. Messenger? You raise both hands, scroll in one, reins in the other. Courier, you call. En route to Setzerleg. They lower their weapons slightly but don't move. Prove it. You remove your riding glove, reach into your belt pouch, and produce your insignia, a small wooden tag with the Khan's emblem burned into it. Weather-worn but still clear. They wave you forward. The closest guard squints at your tag. You're off schedule. There was a storm, you reply, and a man with a broken ankle. He grunts. Figures. They let you pass without further questioning. One of them even offers a dried plum, which you accept with cautious gratitude. It's sour enough to strip enamel from your teeth. But hey, plums are plums. Your quirky tidbit. Mongol guards at watch posts often had their own codes for identifying couriers. Some recognized riders by their horses or their riding style alone. Others developed informal call-and-response phrases to avoid ambushes by imposters. One famous pair of riders reportedly barked like dogs to confirm identity. You consider trying that one day. Historians still argue whether these patrol stations operated as part of the civilian postal system or were more aligned with military oversight. Some say they were strictly defensive. Others claim they gathered intelligence under the guise of routine inspections. Either way, you're glad they didn't spear you on sight. The mountains rise ahead like sleeping giants, blue-gray and crowned in mist. You mount again and begin the long climb. This leg will take hours. You settle into the saddle, tuck your scarf around your nose, and let the mare find her pace. Snowflakes spiral down from the treetops, silent and endless, and somewhere, deep in the forest, a lone owl hoots, like a question no one wants to answer. Awaiting continue. The trail up the mountain twists like a spilled ribbon, narrow, uneven, and unforgiving. Your mare, bless her stubborn hooves, pushes forward with a kind of practiced exasperation, as if she's been up this way before and would rather not repeat the experience. You can relate. The trees thin gradually as you climb, replaced by sharp stones and wind-scoured shrubs that cling to the mountainside like gossip in a small village, tenacious and slightly poisonous. You breathe deeper. The air is crisper up here, colder, cleaner. It stings your lungs in that invigorating way, like eating mint while chewing snow. The scroll at your side is still sealed, green wax holding fast despite the damp and jostling. You tap it once, absent-mindedly, as if reassuring it you haven't forgotten. Its destination isn't far now, just beyond the high pass and into the next valley, where Tsetserleg lies nestled like a secret. Here's your historical fact. Tsetserleg was a crucial provincial center during the Mongol Empire's reign. Though remote, it connected routes leading east to the capital and west toward the Altai. That made it not only a postal stop, but also a place where rumors accumulated about rebellions, betrayals, or the sudden deaths of governors with too many enemies and not enough charm. The wind starts to pick up again, howling through the rocky outcrops like a drunk uncle with too many opinions. You hunch forward, bracing against it, and the mare responds by lowering her head and pushing on. Snow flurries begin to dance around you, but they're light, not storm level. At least not yet. A cluster of stones up ahead marks a resting ledge, flat enough for a rider and their horse to catch their breath. You guide the mare to it, dismount stiffly, and rub her neck as she breathes steam into the cold air. You're halfway up the final incline. From here, you can see the outline of the pass, a deep cut between two peaks, narrow and framed by jagged stone. It looks a bit like a dragon's jaw. Comforting. You take a sip from your water skin. It's half frozen and tastes like leather. Still, hydration is hydration. You reach into your saddlebag and pull out a scrap of dried meat, yak probably, and tear into it like a civilized hyena. The mare eyes you suspiciously. You toss her a dried apple. She chews it like it personally insulted her, and then you hear it, a strange sound. Low, rhythmic, metallic. You pause mid-bite. There it is again. Clink, clink. You press yourself against the rocks and peer around the outcrop. Just up the path, someone has built a row of chimes, bronze discs hanging from bent tree branches, swaying in the wind and producing that eerie musical clinking. Not loud, not chaotic, almost calming. Except you weren't expecting music in the middle of a mountain pass. Your quirky tidbit. Some mountain passes in the Mongol postal routes featured wind chimes or hanging bells, believed to scare off evil spirits, or maybe warn off bandits, depending on who you ask. In some traditions, riders would leave tokens there, coins, bits of fabric, or carved messages. You don't know who started the practice, but someone's been keeping it up. One chime has a feather tied to it. Another holds a piece of fur. You approach quietly, brushing your fingers across one of the hanging discs. It vibrates with a low hum. No evil spirits appear. So far, so good. You pass through the chime line with your mare close behind, her breath forming two long trails of mist that make her look like she's exhaling centuries. The high pass is narrower than you hoped. Snow has drifted along one side, creating a soft bank, but the stone path remains visible. You guide the mare with careful pressure. Left, right, stop. She responds beautifully, grudgingly, like a professional who hates her job but does it well. Historians still argue whether this specific pass, the one you're trudging through now, was maintained year-round or abandoned in the harshest winters. Some maps suggest it closed from November to March. Others show no gap in traffic. Maybe it depended on the year, or the politics, or the number of riders willing to risk frostbite for the sake of a green wax scroll. You crest the ridge, and then everything changes. Below you, the valley yawns open, deep, wide, serene. Snow-blanketed trees line the edges. A frozen river cuts through the center like a silver blade, and nestled in the crook of the mountains lies a walled compound, Tsetserleg. Smoke curls from its chimneys. Lanterns flicker along the walls. It looks warm. It looks safe. It looks like it might even have dumplings. You start down the slope slowly, zigzagging to avoid the steepest sections. The mare picks her steps like a dancer, clumsy at first, but graceful in her own rough way. Halfway down, you pass another rider going the opposite direction. His cloak is caked in ice. His eyes are bloodshot. He nods as he passes, but doesn't speak. You wonder if he's coming from where you're going, or fleeing it. By the time you reach the valley floor, the sky has begun to shift again, darkening toward evening, though with these clouds it's hard to tell. You guide your mare toward the town gates. A guard steps forward, raising one hand. State your purpose. You hold up the scroll. Courier, you reply. Message for the provincial office. He eyes the seal, then nods. You're late, you grin. Snow has opinions. He laughs, just once, and steps aside. Inside the walls, it's warmer than you expected. The buildings are low and huddled together, plastered in earth and stone, roofs dusted with snow. Children dart between doorways. Someone is selling hot broth from a steaming cart. You catch a whiff of garlic and cinnamon and nearly weep. You don't go to the inn. Not yet. Duty first. You ride to the central building, ornate, guarded, humming with quiet authority. You dismount, brush off your cloak, and hand over the scroll. The clerk nods, marks your arrival in a logbook, and points to a bench. You can rest now. You nod and sit and breathe. Awaiting? The bench in the provincial office isn't especially comfortable. Just a plank of wood pressed against a cold wall. But after the mountains, it feels like velvet. Your fingers still tingle from gripping the reins in the wind, and your knees creak every time you shift your weight. The mare is already stabled, probably charming the local handlers with her bad attitude. You glance around the office. A few other couriers sit along the walls, one dozing upright with a half-eaten meat bun in his lap. The air smells of parchment, firewood, and something vaguely medicinal, maybe dried herbs steeping nearby. Behind the main desk, a clerk in a thick robe flips through ledgers with the slow purpose of someone who could outstare a glacier. Name? She asks without looking up. You give it. She scribbles something, tears off a slip, and hands it to you. This is your receipt. The message has been accepted. You'll be assigned your next run tomorrow. You take the slip and tuck it into your pouch. That's it. No ceremony, no congratulations. You carried a critical government message through frost, wolves, and what might have been bandit territory, and you got a piece of paper. You try not to be insulted. It's a weird kind of honor, this job. Quiet, invisible. But without you, nothing connects. Cities don't talk, orders don't arrive, empires don't stretch across continents. They just sit there, isolated and sulking. Here's your historical fact. The Mongol Postal System was one of the most sophisticated pre-modern communication networks in the world. With relay stations roughly every 25 to 30 miles, mounted messengers could cover up to 200 miles in a day, nearly 4 times what European riders were managing at the time. The YAM network was a lifeline between distant provinces and the capital. You leave the office and head into the heart of Setzerleg. The sky is a bruise-colored gray, and snow begins to fall again, gentle, soft flakes this time. The streets are quieter now, traders packing up, the scent of food clinging to the air like a warm blanket. You find the inn easily. It's low, wide, and smells of boiling dumplings, which is a good sign. Inside, a fire crackles. The walls are hung with hides and saddle tack. A large pot steams on the hearth, and someone's playing a stringed instrument in the corner. Not well, but not terribly either. You rent a cot and a hot meal in one motion, then settle at a low table. The woman behind the pot ladles out a serving of something thick, yellow, and bubbling. You don't ask what it is, you just eat it, and it's glorious. You're halfway through your second dumpling when someone slides into the space beside you. You the one from the Northern Line? The man asks. You look up. Mid-30s, patchy beard, eyes that have seen things. Maybe, you reply. Depends who's asking. Name's Dharam. He extends a hand. I'm riding east tomorrow. Rumors say bandits hit a station near Orkhan. You see anything? You shake your head. Just snow and frostbite. He chuckles. That's the usual. You swap stories for a while. Nothing deep, just the kind of low-stakes tales that pass between people who won't see each other again. You learn he once delivered a marriage proposal that led to a 3-week intertribal duel. He learns you fell off a cliff once trying to chase down a runaway gelding. Neither of you is especially impressed. Here's your quirky tidbit. Mongol couriers had unofficial ranking systems for themselves. Not pay grades, but nicknames and internal hierarchies based on speed, endurance, or sheer stubbornness. The fastest were called eagle riders. The unluckiest were ghost saddles. No one wanted that one. It meant the horse came back. The rider didn't. Historians still argue whether this informal postal brotherhood or sisterhood, because yes, some riders were women, held any sway in the court. Some sources suggest veteran couriers occasionally became advisors or intelligence gatherers. Others think they stayed invisible, their service taken for granted even at the empire's peak. You and Dharam eat, drink, and laugh a little. Eventually, the warmth begins to soak into your bones. Your body starts doing that thing where it pretends you're not about to pass out upright. I'm off, you mumble, standing with a grunt. If I don't wake up by tomorrow, don't poke me. Just set me on fire. He snorts. Deal. Your cot is tucked in the back room next to a wooden post carved with horse motifs. There's a fur blanket, slightly damp but warm. You fall into it face first. The next morning, you're assigned a return route. Different scroll, different seal, this one blue. Back through the pass, east this time. No rest for the reliable. You pack quickly, chewing a cold dumpling as you tug on your boots. Outside, the mare is waiting. Someone's brushed her coat. She's furious about it. You stroke her flank and whisper, "Yeah, yeah, me too." You set off under a weak sun. Your saddle creaks in rhythm with your thoughts. It's strange, you realize, how easily you've fallen into this life. This endless string of riding, waiting, delivering, and repeating. There's something deeply satisfying about being part of something so big, so essential, and yet so unseen. You crest the ridge again by mid-morning. The wind is stronger today, but the sky is clear. And for once, the chimes don't sound eerie. They sound like a welcome home. You pause there, just briefly. You tie a strip of cloth to one of the branches. Frayed, gray, nothing special. But it's yours, and it flutters proudly as you ride on. Awaiting continue. By midday, your breath is pluming in thick gusts again, your face half numb, and your backside protesting every jolt of the saddle. You're back in the high country, frost-crusted grasslands that shimmer like a frozen sea. The mare is in a mood, and to be fair, so are you. But the scroll with the blue wax seal bounces securely in your pouch, and that means one thing: you're not done yet. This leg of the journey takes you east toward the Orkhon River. The land dips and rises in slow, deceptive waves. Nothing dramatic, just constant effort. In the distance, smoke curls from the chimney of your next relay station. You urge the mare into a trot. She flicks her ears and lets you know, in no uncertain terms, that she's not a fan of your optimism. The station comes into view. It's a squat structure nestled near a frozen stream, built of timber and daub, roof sagging under a crust of snow. A horse pen sits to one side, and a low flag flutters weakly above the entrance. The smell of dung, hay, and wood smoke greets you like a weird cousin, unpleasant but comforting in its familiarity. You dismount with a wince and hand the mare off to the stable boy, a kid with windburned cheeks and straw-colored hair. "Southbound?" he asks, eyes drifting to the scroll. "East," you reply. He makes a face. "River ice is thinning. Be careful crossing." "Great." You head inside, ducking through a low doorway and into a smoky, dim-lit common room. A hearth crackles to your left, and a pot bubbles on the fire. There are two other couriers lounging by the heat, their boots off and steaming, feet up like they own the place. They glance your way, nod. You nod back. That's the full extent of the welcome. Everyone's too tired for real greetings. You shrug out of your cloak, grab a bowl of whatever's cooking, some sort of millet stew with bits of onion, and slump down onto a low bench. It tastes like warm cardboard, but it's calories. And calories mean survival. Here's your historical fact. These Urchile stations were more than just pit stops. They were strategically placed hubs providing fresh mounts, supplies, and even intelligence. Some larger stations housed spies, who monitored passing messages or reported on suspicious activity. Yes, your job occasionally overlaps with espionage, whether you signed up for it or not. After eating, you head back out to swap horses. The new mount is younger, leaner, all muscle and nerves. A little dancy. You adjust the saddle, check the straps, and whisper something vaguely encouraging to it. The horse responds by sneezing on your boots. Figures. You mount up and head out again, the station fading behind you. The sun slants low in the sky, casting everything in that golden, dreamlike haze that almost makes you forget your thighs feel like overcooked noodles. As the road veers east, the terrain shifts. Rolling hills flatten into wide, icy plains. Patches of wind-blown snow cover jagged rocks. Herds of wild goats graze in the distance, tiny figures on the open stage of the steppe. Every few miles, you spot the remnants of old camps. Ashes in fire circles, stacked stones, a rusted bit of chain left behind. You wonder about the people who passed this way before. Were they riders, bandits, or someone who got caught in between? Then you reach the river. The Orkhon isn't wide this time of year, but it's fast and treacherous beneath the surface crust. You approach carefully, reins tight, eyes scanning for the narrowest crossing. The mare senses it too. She plants her hooves. You click your tongue. "Don't make me carry you," she snorts. You search the bank for a safe spot, one where the ice hasn't turned into slush or opened up into dangerous gaps. A few sticks mark what might have been a crossing point. Maybe. You dismount, pick up a heavy rock, and toss it onto the ice. It doesn't break through, but it echoes, a hollow thump that makes your stomach drop. Still, you can't turn back. You coax the mare forward slowly, leading her by the reins. Step by step, the ice holds, then cracks under her hind leg. A single line snakes outward, sharp, fast. You both freeze. You pull harder, tension in every fiber of your arm. She responds, stepping delicately, shivering with effort. Your boots slip, but you hold on. 5 more steps. 3. 1. You both make it. You collapse onto the other side and give her a relieved slap on the neck. She flicks her tail like it was all your fault. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Mongol messengers carried strips of sheep intestine, dried, rolled up, which they'd toss across icy rivers to gauge the ice's strength. If it bounced lightly, safe. If it splattered, turn around. You kinda wish you had one now. Historians still argue whether these rivers were considered seasonal death traps or just another Tuesday. Some say special training was given for winter crossings. Others insist it was pure instinct and luck. You're voting for luck. And right now, you're fresh out. You mount up again and ride. The eastern path takes you through a birch forest, its thin white trunks glowing in the fading light. Crows caw overhead, black against the orange sky. You pass a stone marker carved with script older than the Empire. Some clan's ancient boundary, maybe? Or a grave. You don't linger to ask. Eventually, you spot the next relay station, a low structure with smoke rising from its chimney and dogs barking out front. As you approach, a figure steps out, bundled in fur, lantern raised. You're late, they call. Everyone keeps saying that, you reply, exhausted. The door opens and light spills out, golden, smoky, full of the scent of roasting meat. You grin. For tonight, at least, you've earned your warmth. Word count, awaiting continue. Your boots thud across the threshold, and the first thing that hits you isn't the warmth, it's the smell. Roasting meat, melting tallow, wet wool drying by the fire, and just the faintest hint of horse. It's not exactly luxurious, but after a day spent courting frostbite and river death, it might as well be a palace. The station keeper nods toward a bench. Fire's there, stew's on, sleep when you're ready. They're not chatty, most of them aren't. You pull off your gloves, frozen stiff, practically wooden, and extend your fingers toward the flames. It takes several painful minutes for the feeling to come back. Pins and needles scream their way up your hands. Your face stings as the blood returns. It's always like this. Your body thawing in pieces, like someone lighting matches under your skin. There's a bowl waiting for you near the hearth. You scoop it up gratefully. It's greasy, slightly sour, but it's hot. A boiled root chunk fights back with your teeth. You chew anyway. Hunger isn't picky. After the meal, you head into the sleeping chamber, a narrow room lined with low platforms and wool-stuffed bedding. A few other riders are already there, some snoring, some murmuring in their sleep. You find an open mat, yank your boots off, and slide under the rough furs. It smells like 100 other couriers have used it. They probably have. You sleep like a dropped rock. In the morning, you're up before dawn, nudged awake by someone with cold fingers and zero sympathy. You groan, blink against the dark, and drag yourself upright. New scroll, new saddlebag, new mount. The keeper hands you a rolled parchment sealed in green wax this time. A different courier system, maybe civilian governance, not military. You don't ask, you're not supposed to. Here's your historical fact. The Mongol Empire's postal system wasn't just military. Its civil branches were equally vital. Tax records, census data, diplomatic correspondence, trade contracts, and foreign intelligence all moved through these same stations. The Empire's strength wasn't just brute force. It was information, flowing swiftly and invisibly. The green seal means this message is probably headed toward Karakoram, or someone close to it. That puts weight behind your saddle and a kind of invisible urgency under your ribs. The pressure never really leaves. Not when you're a human artery for an empire. You mount up, boot heels clicking against the stirrups. Your new horse is taller, calmer, a gelding with a wide chest and a twitchy tail. You pat his neck and whisper, "Be better than the last one." He doesn't sneeze on you. Promising start. You ride eastward into the half-light, your breath forming clouds that linger and drift like spirits. Snow begins to fall again, this time slow and steady, softening the landscape into layers of white silence. The road narrows through a gorge, with high rock faces pressing close. You keep your hand near the hilt of your belt knife, not that it would help much if someone ambushed you here. Luckily, no bandits. Just a lot of snow, and a curious fox who follows at a distance for a mile before disappearing into the trees. You leave an old bit of dumpling meat on a stump for it. Mongol superstition says foxes carry messages between the living and the dead. You're not sure if that's comforting or unnerving. Probably both. Quirky tidbit time. Some riders tied tiny bells to their horses' bridles, not to announce themselves, but to ward off evil spirits. It was thought that the soft jingling disoriented malevolent forces. You're tempted to try it yourself, mostly to drown out the sound of your knees cracking. The road widens again, and you see a caravan in the distance, a merchant convoy heading west, maybe returning from China. You count 10 carts, 24 camels, and what looks like a heavily bundled lute player sitting on a crate, trying to stay awake. They wave as you pass. One of the guards raises a horn cup and shouts something unintelligible. You nod back, too tired to pretend you heard. The caravan's dust fades behind you, and for a long stretch, it's just you and the horse again. You find yourself talking to him about nothing important, just to break the silence. I think we passed that same pine tree 3 times. No response. Right, you're the strong, silent type. I get it. Still no response. Rude. Later that afternoon, the terrain shifts again. Hills flatten into frozen marshes, brittle grass poking up through icy puddles. The horse hates it. You hate it. It's mutual. You're halfway across when you hear the sound. A groan beneath the ice, deep and weirdly alive. The horse stops, so do you. You both listen. Then it happens. A full crack. Not under you, but close. A long, sharp, heart-stopping sound that makes the entire marsh feel like a stage rigged to collapse. You steer wide, sticking to visible clumps of reeds. One wrong step and you're in water so cold it stops your heart before it stops your fall. Historians still argue whether Mongol riders were expected to take these dangerous marsh routes regularly, or if they were meant as seasonal alternatives. Some believe only the most skilled couriers, those with extensive local knowledge, were assigned here. Others think desperation made fools of everyone, regardless of orders. By the time you reach dry ground again, your boots are soaked, your legs numb, and your saddle is flecked with frozen mud. But you're alive. So is the horse, barely. You spot smoke rising ahead, thin and straight in the still air, a sign of shelter. And sure enough, there it is. Another relay station, this one perched on a rocky bluff above the marsh. You climb the slope slowly, the horse panting beneath you. At the top, a wooden gate creaks open and a pair of station guards emerge. One of them recognizes the green seal and hurries you inside. Important, he asks. You shrug. They all are. Inside, the station is better kept than the last. Clean bedding, warmer fire, even a few shelves of dried fruit and medicinal herbs along the walls. You wonder if this is one of the favored stops, kept polished for higher priority runs. You drop the saddlebag bag gently onto the desk and stretch your arms, every joint popping like a bag of firecrackers. The keeper logs your arrival and glances at the seal without opening it. Want food or sleep first? She asks. Sleep. Unless the food's gonna sleep too. She laughs softly and gestures toward a side room. You head in, peel off your wet gear, and collapse onto the thickest mat you've ever seen. Just before your eyes close, you hear a distant howl. Wolf. Maybe more than one. You pull the blanket tighter and mutter, "Tell them I'm off duty." Sleep takes you before the echo fades. Awaiting continue, morning light creeps in through the window slats like an uninvited guest. You lie there for a moment, still wrapped in warmth, trying to decide if pretending to be dead is a valid excuse for not riding today. Unfortunately, your horse would probably just eat your boots and wander off without you. You roll up, stretch until your spine protests, and gear up once again. The keeper greets you with a strip of dried apricot and a tiny clay cup of fermented mare's milk. Arag, the breakfast of champions and deeply questionable stomachs. It fizzes on your tongue like someone dissolved cheese in vinegar and dared you to enjoy it. You choke it down, offer a polite nod, and head out into a crisp, windless morning. Today's route climbs steadily upward into hilly forest land. Dense pine, crooked birch, the occasional startled deer crashing through the underbrush. Your horse handles the incline well, muscles taut under the saddle, hooves biting into the frozen soil with stubborn determination. Here's your historical fact. Mongol couriers often had detailed mental maps of the terrain, passed down orally or through apprentice writing. There were no road signs, no Google Maps whispering directions. Routes were memorized by instinct, star patterns, tree shapes, even the sound of rivers. Some say elite messengers could navigate blindfolded, though you're hoping nobody's planning to test that on you today. As you weave through the forest, the landscape turns strange. Birdsong stops. Trees grow too close, their bark carved with strange symbols, spirals, claws, runes that look suspiciously like warnings. You spot an old altar stone, long abandoned, with the remains of bird bones and what may or may not be horsehair strewn across it. You slow down, heart doing that nervous drumbeat thing. You've entered shaman land. Quirky tidbit? Mongol shamans, once used the postal network to travel under protection. Some even acted as spiritual consultants to station keepers, especially when relay stops were plagued by misfortune. Bad weather, animal attacks, ghost sightings, blame the spirits. Bring in the shaman, burn some bones. Done. You make a mental note not to touch anything. The wind picks up. Branches rattle like bones, and just for a second, you swear you hear chanting. Then it's gone. Just the creak of trees in the cold. You pull your cloak tighter and press on. By late morning, the forest breaks, revealing a broad valley with scattered yurts clustered near a frozen stream. Smoke rises from cooking fires, and children dart between the felt tents, chasing each other with sticks. A dog barks at your approach, then runs away as if offended by your existence. You skirt the encampment respectfully, eyes low. It's a noble family's winter quarters, judging by the decorated cart and bronze-capped saddle frames outside the main yurt. Nobles mean influence. Influence means trouble if you say the wrong thing. You nod to a herder who watches you pass, his expression unreadable. He doesn't nod back. The wind shifts again, carrying with it a strange scent, sharp, metallic, almost smoky. You glance upwind and spot it. A fire, burning fast and uncontrolled, maybe a mile off route, too far to be a station. You're not required to investigate, but it's hard to ignore. You urge the horse toward it, skirting the valley and pushing through a field of frost-blasted weeds. The smell intensifies. Burned wood, charred leather, something worse underneath. Then you see it, an abandoned station, or what's left of one. The roof has collapsed, the pen is empty, and soot stains the surrounding snow. Someone ransacked it. Recently. You dismount, heart thudding, and approach on foot. The interior is half-gutted, supplies scattered or gone. You spot shards of broken pottery, a torn saddlebag, and a single boot burned at the toe. No bodies, though. Whoever did this either left in a hurry or didn't stick around. Historians still argue whether these kinds of attacks were acts of rebellion, criminal banditry, or rival clans making quiet moves against the Khan's power. Some say they were lone wolves. Others point to coordinated patterns of sabotage, especially during transitions of power between Khans. You check for salvage. One half-melted oil lamp, a cracked spoon, and a small cloth pouch with dried medicinal leaves. You take the leaves. Your joints hurt. The horse shifts uneasily as you return. You mount up and ride harder now, nerves alight. The next relay station isn't far, you hope. The sun arcs low and fast in the sky, as if in a hurry to leave you behind. By late afternoon, you arrive at a station built into a hillside, its entrance hidden by thick brush. It's an older one, built before the current Khan's reforms, with heavier logs and deeper foundations. A man with one eye and a voice like gravel lets you in. He hears your report about the burned station and grunts. Third this season. You blink. Third? South of here, too. And one up near Lake Baikal. You sit down hard. The man pours you something strong and hot. Tastes like boiled bark and regret. You drink it anyway. Maybe we're being tested, he mutters, almost to himself. Or maybe someone's testing the system. You think of the green-sealed scroll in your pack, and suddenly you really want it to get to where it's going. The keeper gives you a fresh horse, this one older but steady-eyed and sure-footed. You name it Old Bones immediately and promise to let it pick the pace. You don't think it was planning to ask your opinion anyway. You eat a quick meal of roasted turnip and salt-cured goat, wrap your feet in extra wool, and head out again into the creeping dusk. One more station. Then you can sleep indoors, with walls, maybe even a full blanket. Wild ambitions. The road descends into a long ravine and the temperature drops like a rock. You can see your breath again. It looks anxious. But as you round the final bend, a warm, past golden glow spills out between two pine trees. You've made it. The relay station rises ahead, sturdy and reassuring, lanterns lit and smoke curling from its chimney like a welcome flag. You lean forward, pat old bones, and whisper, "We're home, for tonight." The horse snorts as if to say, "You're welcome."
Awaiting continue.
You unsaddle old bones slowly, your hands numb despite the gloves. Every strap, buckle, and loop feels like a tiny war. When you finally remove the gear, the horse lets out a deep sigh, equal parts relief and judgment, and ambles off toward the hay pile without waiting for thanks. Inside the station, it's warmer than expected. Not just heated, cozy, lived in, even welcoming. The walls are hung with woolen tapestries, their patterns winding and strange. A copper pot simmers over the fire, bubbling with something spicy enough to sting your nose. The station keeper, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a braid thick as your arm, waves you in. "No bleeding? No frostbite? No arrows in your backside?" she asks without looking up from her scroll work. You manage a tired thumbs up. "Then you'll live. Scroll, please." You hand her the sealed message. She examines the green wax, nods, and places it in a lacquered case with 6 other scrolls, all different seals, all treated with the same reverence as relics. You don't ask what's in them. That's not your job. Your job is to eat the stew, collapse in a corner, and hopefully not snore loud enough to wake the goats. While you eat, you listen to the keeper talk with another rider. They speak in low tones, careful and clipped, like people used to secrets. You catch only fragments. Delays near the Orkhon Bridge. Merchant relay hijacked again. Karakoram wants tighter inspections, but the riders won't stand for it. You slurp your soup and pretend not to hear. Here's your historical fact. By the mid-13th century, the Mongol relay network had become so essential to imperial function that disrupting it, even slightly, could cause weeks of administrative chaos. The system was that effective, that tightly woven, which made it both a strength and a glaring vulnerability. As night deepens, the keeper offers you a bedroll near the hearth. The other rider, a younger man with a fresh scar along his jaw, takes the one beside you. He nods, says nothing, and promptly falls asleep with alarming efficiency. You stare into the fire and think about the burned station, the silence of the forest, the weight of that green seal. You sleep lightly. Dawn seeps in like a fog, pale and hesitant. Today, you're tasked not with carrying a message, but escorting one. The keeper hands you a sealed case and informs you, with very little ceremony, that you're to accompany the next senior courier northward. The scroll inside? Destination, Kongai Mountains. Personal recipient. Which basically means VIP. The courier is the scarred man from last night. Name's Batu. Says more with a look than a whole speech. He checks the straps on his pack 3 times before saying a word to you. You fall behind, he grunts. You're on your own. You resist the urge to respond with something sarcastic. This guy could probably bench press a goat. The 2 of you set out before the sun clears the treetops. The trail climbs fast into sharper elevation. Switchbacks carved into ancient river paths, trees clinging to ledges like they're afraid to let go. The wind is brutal. Your scarf becomes a second mouth, muffling your breath, frosting at the edges. Batu rides ahead, silent, efficient. His horse, jet black, sleek, a bit smug-looking, moves like it knows it's better than yours. You press on anyway, pushing through the aches, the cold, the cramp in your left foot that refuses to leave. Midway up the slope, you pass an old shrine, just a pile of stones draped in blue silk ribbons, fluttering like tired prayers. Batu dismounts, bows once, and leaves a tiny silver coin. You do the same, minus the silver. All you've got is a pebble and a dry leaf, but it's the gesture that counts. Quirky tidbit? Mongol couriers often carried lucky charms, horsehair knots, carved bone tokens, even bits of cloth from their first station. Some believed it kept the spirits of the land from interfering with the journey. Others figured it was just habit. You're still deciding. The trail narrows. At one point, you're forced to dismount and lead the horses single file across a snow-coated ridge. One slip, and it's a 1,000-foot tumble into nothingness. Batu goes first. You watch how carefully he places each step. No drama, no fear. Then it's your turn. The path is barely wide enough for your boots. The horse's hooves slide once, just a fraction, but enough to spike your pulse. You mutter comforting nonsense the whole way across to the horse, to yourself, to whatever local deity claims this ridge. When you make it, Batu nods once, approving but wordless. Down into the valley, up again. Then, without warning, you arrive. Not at a relay, not at a village, but at a tent. A single, massive jur, gleaming white against the mountainside, with golden trimmings on the flap and two guards out front, one armed with a bow, the other with an attitude. Batu dismounts. Wait here. He disappears inside. You wait. The guards eye you like you're a chicken that wandered into a lion pen. You try to act like you belong here. It's not very convincing. Minutes pass. Long, cold, anxious minutes. Finally, Batu returns. He looks different. Not scared, exactly, but tense, focused. He doesn't say what happened. He just mounts up and says, "We ride. Now." You follow, not because you have to, but because something about that tent felt too big for words. Historians still argue whether the highest-ranking Mongol elites personally met their messengers or if intermediaries handled it all. Some records suggest the Great Khan himself once thanked a courier in person. Others call it legend, a bedtime story told by saddle-worn riders with nothing but firelight and fermented milk to pass the time. But tonight, under the stars, with the wind in your ears and the sky clearer than it's been in weeks, you wonder, who exactly was inside that tent? And what message was so important that it needed not just speed but silence? Your horse plods forward, hooves crunching over frost. Batu rides ahead, cloak flapping like a silent banner. Neither of you speaks. The journey continues. You unsaddle Old Bone slowly, your hands numb despite the gloves. Every strap, buckle, and loop feels like a tiny war. When you finally remove the gear, the horse lets out a deep sigh, equal parts relief and judgment, and ambles off toward the hay pile without waiting for thanks. Inside the station, it's warmer than expected. Not just heated, cozy, lived in, even welcoming. The walls are hung with woolen tapestries, their patterns winding and strange. A copper pot simmers over the fire, bubbling with something spicy enough to sting your nose. The station keeper, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a braid thick as your arm, waves you in. No bleeding, no frostbite, no arrows in your backside, she asks without looking up from her scroll work. You manage a tired thumbs up. Then you'll live. Scroll, please. You hand her the sealed message. She examines the green wax, nods, and places it in a lacquered case with 6 other scrolls, all different seals, all treated with the same reverence as relics. You don't ask what's in them. That's not your job. Your job is to eat the stew, collapse in a corner, and hopefully not snore loud enough to wake the goats. While you eat, you listen to the keeper talk with another rider. They speak in low tones, careful and clipped like people used to secrets. You catch only fragments, delays near the Orkhon Bridge. Merchant relay hijacked again. Karakorum wants tighter inspections, but the riders won't stand for it. You slurp your soup and pretend not to hear. Here's your historical fact. By the mid-13th century, the Mongol relay network had become so essential to imperial function that disrupting it, even slightly, could cause weeks of administrative chaos. The system was that effective, that tightly woven, which made it both a strength and a glaring vulnerability. As night deepens, the keeper offers you a bedroll near the hearth. The other rider, a younger man with a fresh scar along his jaw, takes the one beside you. He nods, says nothing, and promptly falls asleep with alarming efficiency. You stare into the fire and think about the burned station, the silence of the forest, the weight of that green seal. You sleep lightly. Dawn seeps in like a fog, pale and hesitant. Today, you're tasked not with carrying a message, but escorting one. The keeper hands you a sealed case and informs you with very little ceremony that you're to accompany the next senior courier northward. The scroll inside? Destination, Kongai Mountains. Personal recipient. Which basically means VIP. The courier is the scarred man from last night. Name's Batu. Says more with a look than a whole speech. He checks the straps on his pack 3 times before saying a word to you. You fall behind, he grunts. You're on your own. You resist the urge to respond with something sarcastic. This guy could probably bench press a goat. The two of you set out before the sun clears the treetops. The trail climbs fast into sharper elevation, switchbacks carved into ancient river paths, trees clinging to ledges like they're afraid to let go. The wind is brutal. Your scarf becomes a second mouth, muffling your breath, frosting at the edges. Batu rides ahead, silent, efficient. His horse, jet black, sleek, a bit smug-looking, moves like it knows it's better than yours. You press on anyway, pushing through the aches, the cold, the cramp in your left foot that refuses to leave. Midway up the slope, you pass an old shrine, just a pile of stones draped in blue silk ribbons, fluttering like tired prayers. Batu dismounts, bows once, and leaves a tiny silver coin. You do the same, minus the silver. All you've got is a pebble and a dry leaf, but it's the gesture that counts. Quirky tidbit: Mongol couriers often carried lucky charms, horsehair knots, carved bone tokens, even bits of cloth from their first station. Some believed it kept the spirits of the land from interfering with the journey. Others figured it was just habit. You're still deciding. The trail narrows. At one point, you're forced to dismount and lead the horses single file across a snow-coated ridge. One slip and it's a 1,000-foot tumble into nothingness. Batu goes first. You watch how carefully he places each step. No drama, no fear. Then it's your turn. The path is barely wide enough for your boots. The horse's hooves slide once, just a fraction, but enough to spike your pulse. You mutter comforting nonsense the whole way across, to the horse, to yourself, to whatever local deity claims this ridge. When you make it, Batu nods once, approving but wordless, down into the valley, up again. Then, without warning, you arrive. Not at a relay. Not at a village, but at a tent. A single massive jur, gleaming white against the mountainside, with golden trimmings on the flap and 2 guards out front, one armed with a bow, the other with an attitude. Batu dismounts. Wait here. He disappears inside. You wait. The guards eye you like you're a chicken that wandered into a lion pen. You try to act like you belong here. It's not very convincing. Minutes pass. Long, cold, anxious minutes. Finally, Batu returns. He looks different. Not scared exactly, but tense. Focused. He doesn't say what happened. He just mounts up and says, "We ride, now." You follow. Not because you have to, but because something about that tent felt too big for words. Historians still argue whether the highest-ranking Mongol elites personally met their messengers or if intermediaries handled it all. Some records suggest the Great Khan himself once thanked a courier in person. Others call it legend, a bedtime story told by saddle-worn riders with nothing but firelight and fermented milk to pass the time. But tonight, under the stars, with the wind in your ears and the sky clearer than it's been in weeks, you wonder, who exactly was inside that tent? And what message was so important that it needed not just speed, but silence? Your horse plods forward, hooves crunching over frost. Batu rides ahead, cloak flapping like a silent banner. Neither of you speaks. The journey continues. Awaiting continue, by mid-morning, the snow has turned soft underfoot, still crusted with ice, but beginning to thaw in streaks where sunlight touches it directly. It's warmer here, in a strange, almost teasing way. You find yourself squinting into the distance, blinking at the haze of melting frost. Batu finally pulls up at the crest of a small hill. Below stretches a shallow plain ringed by birch trees, their trunks like bone against the blue sky. Nestled at the center is your destination, the final relay station on this route. Modest, square, and still upright, always a bonus. You ride in silence down the slope, your joints aching from the cold and the constant tension of staying upright on uneven terrain. As you near the gate, you can see 2 stable hands already jogging out to meet you. One of them trips over his own foot and pretends he meant to do it. You dismount, rubbing your thighs like a saddle-worn peasant, which, to be fair, is exactly what you are. Inside, the station is peaceful. There's no emergency, no frantic scroll swapping, no whispers about attacks. Just a few riders curled in corners, some bread baking over the hearth, and a smell you haven't sensed in a while. Calm. Batu speaks briefly with the keeper, then hands off the message scroll. And with that, your duty is done. You could head back right now. Another relay, another assignment, another endless blur of horses and weather and uncertain maps. But the keeper surprises you. She offers you something warm, steamed dumplings stuffed with lamb and garlic, and a quiet bedroll near the rear wall. The kind of offer you don't question, just accept with a grateful grunt and a nod that probably says more than words could. You eat slowly, deliberately. It's the first time in days that chewing feels like a luxury, not a race. You stretch out, feeling the day begin to bleed from your bones. And for a few moments, you allow yourself the impossible to rest. Your historical fact? The Mongol Relay Network covered over 200,000 miles at its peak, with more than 1,400 stations. It spanned deserts, rivers, forests, and mountains. It was, in many ways, the circulatory system of the largest contiguous empire in world history. Without it, the empire might have splintered far sooner. With it, the Mongols achieved near-instant communication across regions the size of continents. But even mighty networks need small hands to hold them together. Writers like you. Nobody writes songs about you. Nobody puts your name in a scroll. But maybe, just maybe, the person who opens that green-sealed message tomorrow will make a decision that changes everything. Or maybe they'll use it to line their boots. Historians still argue whether this system was sustainable in the long run, or if it was doomed from the start. Some claim it was too reliant on central control, others say its decentralized strength was its very genius. Maybe they're all right, or all wrong. You've stopped trying to keep track. You lie back, eyes fluttering shut, and in your half-sleep haze, you think about all the little things that got you here. The suspicious goat, the angry firewood man, the shamanic symbols carved into trees, the slippery saddle, the cracked spoon, old bones' judgy snorts. You've ridden through landscapes that whisper, not speak. You've slept beside fire pits and frozen rivers. You've handled secrets meant for thrones. And still, nobody thanks the writer. But that's okay, because you know, and now, wind down. Your eyes feel heavy now, like smooth stones being gently pulled toward the earth. The fire in the station crackles softly, and every pop of resin in the wood sounds like a lullaby drawn from the bones of the mountain. Outside, the birch trees sway gently, their branches creaking in a rhythm that's almost too slow to follow. Your bedroll cradles you with a softness that feels well-earned, every fold and layer warming your limbs like a hush in cloth form. You shift slightly, just enough to sink a little deeper into its warmth. Your muscles are sore, yes, but in the way that tells you a journey is behind you and not ahead. The scents in the air, smoke, wool, a trace of garlic from the meal, mingle with the quiet peace of rest long delayed. The voices of the other riders have faded into murmurs, then silence. Even Batu's footsteps, heavy as they are, have disappeared into the far end of the station, as if he too has allowed himself a few stolen hours of stillness. Out there, across frozen hills and whispering trees, another message is already being prepared. Another horse is being saddled. Another rider is eating their final bite of dumpling before stepping out into the snow. But not you. Not tonight. Tonight, you are still, and the Empire can spin a little longer without your help. So breathe deep now. Let the crackle of fire and the hum of wind wrap around you like a slow-moving stream. Let your journey fade gently into dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.